So in I guess you could call the mystic side of our practice of Trikaya Buddhism, there's this concept of having to believe. And all that really means is that everyone has to believe in something. It's required by our very existence that we find ourselves believing in something. It seems to be a package deal. So if we have these bodies and we live in this world, then this conditioning happens where we're taught to believe in different things. And I suppose we all rebel at a certain point and say, no, I don't believe in anything. Or at least I did. I don't know about you. But even that in itself, saying you don't believe in anything, is still believing in something. You're just believing in the negative. So if we start to understand, well, we have to believe in something, then the intelligent thing to do, of course, is then to choose what it is we're going to believe in. We can just accept what we've been told over and over and over again, or we can investigate and look at it and say, well, does this belief actually support me? Does it lead to greater truth? In our practice, we have a certain faith that we hold at the beginning, and it's required in order for us to really give ourselves to the path. And it's very simple. It's just we believe in the inherent Buddha nature of all things, this essential goodness. And we believe in the possibility of actually knowing that. In other words, we believe in enlightenment, that enlightenment is possible this lifetime. And it starts off as something we take on faith. Because I can tell you everything has an essential goodness. Everything has Buddha nature. There is an inherent joy to existence that is not dependent upon anything. It just is. And I can tell you that, but until you experience it yourselves, it doesn't mean much. But if you see me or other teachers and say, oh wow, actually they do seem kind of happy. Maybe there's something there. And then that allows us to take that on faith. You know, this is what my teacher did for me. He was very happy. Just, he exuded a certain joy every time I saw him. And so that allowed me to take that on faith. Like, okay, there's something to that. What is that? How does it work? How can I actually experience that for myself? And so when we make this choice, I made a choice because I have to believe in something, that, okay, yes, I will believe in this enlightenment business, even though I don't understand it. No one can define it. If you look at all the different Buddhist books, they all say, you know, it's beyond description. It's the beyond beyond. It's like, well, what does that mean? And yet there's this opportunity to just accept on faith and say, okay, yes, there's something there. Can't define it. I know it's not this daily grind of suffering and misery. There's something more. So if I choose to believe in that, choose to believe in enlightenment, choose to believe that there is inherent joy in existence, that there is essential goodness, it changes the worldview. If you talk to other people who maybe are just conditioned by television or social media and all the horrors of the world, then people begin to believe that this is a very hostile and horrible place to be. And that becomes a worldview. As I said, we have to believe in something, and if we don't choose what we believe in, then it becomes by default conditioned, and it grows out of this stimulus that we feed our mind. So does that mean that we don't recognize that there are horrors in the world? Of course not. There are, how did my teacher put it? He said, everything is a reflection of light, and some reflections are much more distorted than others. So when we see people doing horrific things, it's because their reflection, their view of the world is so distorted that to them it seems normal. But we don't have to live in that world. We can live in a much brighter, happier, more beautiful place simply by examining what are our beliefs. What are we holding as true? And then, as I said in the beginning, we take something on faith. We say, okay, this has been passed down for centuries, that there is this Buddha nature, this enlightenment, this essential goodness. And some people, that's enough. They'll just stop there. And then you have what I call the more, it's almost like a westernized version, where they are waiting for this afterlife to be born into the Buddha land. But in my world, we're in the Buddha land. We are in the Buddhaverse already. We don't have to wait until we're reborn in some better place. The place is here, and the time is now where we can open. But again, it's not, if you just take it on faith and stop and don't do any more work, then it's kind of like you put yourself in this weird limbo, and it's very fragile. So you have to constantly be reaffirming that, and that's becomes very repetitive, and we don't really experience anything. We're just trapped in this little mental bubble. But if we take that little bit of faith and say, okay, I accept the possibility of enlightenment. Just accept this possibility that there is joy right now. I'm not saying that it's definitely there, but it's possible. And if we just have that much faith, that opens us to this flow of energy that allows us to actually practice. That says, okay, I'm going to put in the effort to actually sit and stop my thoughts and actually let go into that silence without feeling like I have to control everything. Because I believe in essential goodness. And this part of me that is always trying to control everything lives in fear all the time. But this little bit of faith that says, you know what, maybe there is this enlightenment, maybe there is essential goodness. And that is enough to allow us to let go for that briefest of moments. And in that silence, all of those layers of conditioning start to melt. All of that structure that's holding us in a certain worldview starts to break apart. And then when we stand up from the meditation cushion, that's when the real work can begin, or really continue, as we start to train our mind to see truth. We start to pay attention. And in the beginning, it's just this game of training the mind. You know, we've been conditioned for our mind to always play out certain patterns. And if a pattern makes us feel miserable, if it causes suffering, then I highly recommend that you change it. That if every time you see a certain person or a certain type of person, it might not even be a certain person, maybe it's just a certain type of person you see, and it causes you anxiety, or it causes you distress or anger or whatever it is, look at that carefully and say, well, do I really need to continue this pattern? I don't actually know this person. I'm constantly changing, they're constantly changing. I really don't know how they are or who they are at this moment. So maybe I'll just experience them as they are right now and act from there. But to get there, there's this little bit of training that we do, and this is what I call the gratitude and beauty game. So every time you find your mind spinning out into a state of suffering, a state of distress, we just acknowledge what's happened and then look around in our present environment and find beauty or gratitude. It might be gratitude for just being able to breathe. It might be the beauty of a certain color that we see. You know, maybe we're driving and a car just cut us off, and so now we're really upset because our adrenaline's going and then we almost got in an accident. So there's the fear and the anger and then the righteousness of how dare they drive so badly. And that whole mental spin can ruin your entire day if you just let it continue. But if you're practicing, if you're playing this gratitude and beauty game, you can catch yourself and say, oh, I'm spinning out. Let me stop. Oh, you know, that actually is a really pretty color of that car that just cut me off. And I can appreciate that color. Or I can feel gratitude for the fact that I'm able to have a car and I can drive. And we key our attention into that. And it shifts our worldview into one of beauty and gratitude, which then helps us understand the truth of essential goodness. That there is Buddha nature in everything and everyone, even the person who was distracted and being a jerk and cut you off. So this concept of having to believe, it's one that we examine over and over again as we develop on the path. As I said, in the very beginning, we have just this little tiny bit of faith that gets us to start practicing. And then as we continue with the practice, we become a little more critical of the beliefs that we harbor. and we start to dissect them and really determine, is this a belief I need to carry with me? Or maybe there's something that you've always wanted to try, but you were told your whole life that either it's not proper or it's not possible or it's just not something that you should do. But yet there's this interest that's at conflict with this underlying belief. So that's a belief that we can look at. I grew up in a very small town, and most people had no interest in ever leaving that town. Like, there's still people that have lived there their whole lives, they've never left. And then even watching my niece grow up, like, she has no interest of ever leaving that area. And I grew up wanting to travel, just wanting to explore, always wanting to go. Yet there was this belief that, no, people don't leave here. If they do, they always come back. And even when I was 18 and I was leaving home, everybody in my family and all my friends were like, oh, she'll be back in 6 months. So there was this heavy belief that I was given that, no, people that grow up in that little town in Massachusetts, they all go back. And that was a really long time ago. I won't say how long. But it was a belief that I just decided not to buy into. It was one that I chose not to carry. So as you practice, as I said, really start to consider the beliefs that you hold. They're very powerful. They actually determine the choices that you have. If I had believed what I was told, what everybody was pushing on me, then yeah, the first time I hit a challenge, I would have been on a plane heading back and moving back in with my parents and starting all over again there. But I chose not to have that belief. So we all have things like that. Some are very overt, like that just example, and others are much more subtle. Ones that have to do with our self-image. Like, we should project ourselves in a certain way. And that's not always true. So this is both the challenge and the exciting part of the path, is we have to believe in something, but we get to choose what that something is. And this isn't something that we just do once and then we're done. This is something that we reaffirm over and over and over all day long, every day. So this is where really paying attention to your mind comes in as such a big component of our practice. So yes, we sit and we meditate and we let go of everything and just go into that silence. But then when we stand up and we start interacting, that's when those patterns really start to become evident. And when you find yourself entering a place of doubt, it's like, oh, I'm not sure if I should do this or if I can do this. That's a big flag. I'm like, hey, there's a belief here. Look at that. And ascertain, is that belief actually true? It may have been a long time ago. Maybe it was a belief that you developed because it protected you in some way, because it held your little world together at that point. You had to believe that. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's a useful thing. But as we grow and change and develop, these old beliefs don't always serve us. And at that time, we can look at it with just total honesty and say, oh, this is no longer true. I don't have to carry this belief anymore. I don't have to push it on myself, and I don't have to push it on others. And I don't have to accept it from others either. That's sometimes the more challenging part of the practice, is because we live in this relational world, people want us to remain how they view us. So the moment we become serious about our practice, we start to rapidly change and cycle. And suddenly we're not the same person that we were 5 minutes ago, or the last time we saw them, a week ago, a month ago. And we have different beliefs. We have a different worldview. And we start to interact with this person, and then they're pushing their beliefs on us. And we're recognizing, no, that's not true for me anymore. And it can sometimes degrade into all and out war as people fight about, no, this is how you are. And you say, no, I'm not anymore. But most of the times it's much more subtle. That's why paying attention as we go about our life is so important, because that's when our beliefs are challenged. We've recognized that, oh, I don't need to carry this belief anymore, so I'm going to let it go. And then we run into somebody that we used to know, or that we know, who knew us when we had that belief, and they push it on us because they're expecting it. And we have to hold our ground inwardly and recognize that it's okay for them to have that belief, but I don't have to have that belief anymore because it doesn't serve me. And this leads us to developing tolerance and ultimately compassion, because we might recognize how that belief was harming us and holding us back, and now we see it in somebody that we care about, and they're holding that belief and it's harming them and holding them back, but we can't change them. We can share our realizations, but don't expect somebody else to suddenly change just because you did. Your relationship with them will change, because as I said, we live in a relational world, and as you shift and change, then our relationships all shift and change. But in short, you have the power to decide what to believe. And it's powerful. So use that power to find truth. And what I found, as I said earlier, is that there is Buddha nature in everything, that there is this, what I call unreasonable joy, that anytime that there is sorrow, anytime there is suffering, there is a reason. But when we're happy, there doesn't have to be a reason. So what that means is there's just this underlying level of happiness, of joy, of just pure, pristine joy that's available to us all the time. This Buddha nature, this essential goodness. And we don't have to do anything to earn it, to be worthy of it. We are it. But we forget. because we have all these beliefs, all these levels of conditioning. So use this power of having to believe wisely. So let's do some more meditation. Kind of let all this sink in. If you're watching on YouTube, then hit the like button, subscribe, share.